Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. Ludovic Byron and his sister Sylvia were professional psychics who had changed their names so as to appeal more to the spiritual aspirations of their clientele. They had decided that their birth names, Thomas and Caroline Carrot, would be a decided handicap in their psychical careers. And fortunately, their respective spiritual guides still communicated with them just as freely since the change. Ludovic's rare mediumistic gifts were first revealed to him at a young age, and his spiritual guide was Asteria, a Greek maiden of ancient Athens who had suffered martyrdom. She described an ecstatic existence of spiritual progress on the other side, and also knew many friends and relatives who had passed over of Ludovic's circle of devotees. Ludovic would sink into a sort of trance in which Asteria took possession of him and communicated through his speech. At other seances, Asteria used his hand and pencil to write pages of automatic script, using quaint and sometimes indecipherable language. Any member of the circle of sitters could ask Asteria questions, and she would give charming answers. It was only lately that Sylvia had discovered her own psychical gifts and got into touch with her guide. The recent winter and spring had been a very busy time for Ludovic, and one of his regular sitters, a Mrs. Sapson, had been trying to persuade him to go for a short holiday. He was very unwilling to abandon his work of 5 full seances per day that so many people found so enlightening, until Mrs. Sapson cleverly asked Asteria during one of his trances whether he ought not to take a rest. Asteria's counsel was, "Be it so," after which Mrs. Sapson delightedly offered Ludovic her cottage in Rye for such a purpose. Her tenant had suddenly left, and the place was quiet and close to the sea. Both Ludovic and Sylvia leapt at the generous offer, looking forward to the country air and sea breezes. Ludovic had just bought a new camera and was planning to take up spirit photography as a way of extending his work. The appearance of the so-called extra or nearby spirit in a photograph repays the photographer in spades, he believed, by bringing in fresh clients. With a capable servant called Gramsby in tow, Sylvia and Ludovic arrived at Mrs. Sapson's cottage the following afternoon. The place was near remote sand dunes and plainly furnished, with a large open fireplace and ready logs laid nearby. After an evening walk, the pair ate supper and began a game of patience, until Ludovic confessed to not being able to concentrate. He felt as if someone was trying to attract his attention, and wondered if Asteria wanted to communicate. Sylvia also felt as if her guide was trying to get through, although it didn't seem quite like her. Ludovic found a pencil and paper and sat composed, waiting for Asteria to emerge, his eyelids eventually fluttering and closing. On being asked by Sylvia if either Asteria or her own guide was present, the pencil emphatically scribbled, "Certainly not." The presence revealed itself as someone called Thomas Spinach, the young Spinach. Sylvia laughed, convinced that her brother's subconscious self was trying to remember his name of Carrot. But the unknown control continued writing, asking for help and claiming that he could not remember, that he was very unhappy. There suddenly came a very loud rap on the wall above Sylvia, and, startled, she sprang up and shook Ludovic by the shoulder. There was a strange spirit in the room, and when he read what it had written, he became intrigued. The spirit called Spinach was powerful, as he had come through the first time he had tried. It would be fine, said Ludovic, to get a new control for their seances, although Sylvia was concerned that he may be violent after the loud rap. The following morning, Ludovic tried to snap the spirit with his camera. He took dozens of exposures, after which he retreated into a small dark cupboard under the stairs where he had installed his developing and fixing baths. Soon he was calling Sylvia in crowing, exultant tones, saying that he had a picture of her with a magnificent extra, a face hanging in the air by her shoulder. In the photograph, there sat Sylvia by the window, and close by her was a strange, inexplicable face, that of a handsome young man whose features wore an expression of agonised entreaty. Somehow Sylvia did not like him. Then she wondered if this was the face of young Spinach. That evening the pair prepared for a double séance, both ready with pencil and paper to take down the spirit's slightest word. Sylvia started writing first, and Ludovic got up to read what was coming through. The spirit confirmed itself as the unhappy Thomas Spinach, and again asked for help in locating something very unusual that he had forgotten. Spinach explained that he had once lived in the cottage and had passed over suddenly 1 week ago. He had been struck by lightning in a thunderstorm, and when he came to on the other side, he couldn't remember where it was. He was frightened and begged them to please find it. There was another appalling rap on the wall close to Ludovic, who sprang up and shook Sylvia into consciousness. On reading her manuscript, she remembered that she had read of a violent thunderstorm in Rye over a week ago. The pair composed a telegram for Mrs. Sapson, telling her that they had communicated with her former tenant, Spinach. The next morning they received an enthusiastic reply telegram from Mrs. Sapson, telling them to find out more and ask Spinach about his uncle. Sylvia gave Gramsby the afternoon off, and the two mediums prepared for another séance. With only Sylvia writing this time, Spinach again came through and asked if they had found it. Remembering Mrs. Sapson's telegram, Ludovic asked if it had anything to do with Spinach's uncle, and the pencil wrote, "Please find him." After further questioning, Spinach wrote that he had put it somewhere, but the lightning strike had destroyed his memory of where he had put it. An uneasy thought struck Ludovic. Was Spinach's uncle dead? He asked. Sylvia's fingers writhed as if in mortal agony. Then the pencil jerked out, "Yes." Ludovic, accustomed as he was to spirits, felt an icy shudder run through him as he waited in silence. Then Spinach confessed that he had done away with his uncle and couldn't remember where he had put him. Shocked and indignant as Ludovic became, he then felt a professional interest in the imminent revelations. It would be a glorious thing for his career to receive, from a departed spirit, the first-hand account of this undetected crime, and then corroborate it by the discovery of the remains. Mrs. Sapson would publicise news of it far and wide, and the séances would be more popular than ever. Ludovic's knowledge of conditions on the other side would increase. The pencil streamed across the page and filled sheet after sheet with the remarkable disclosures. Alexander Spinach, the orphan boy's uncle, had made life intolerable for him. A petty forgery by Thomas as a child had resulted in him blackmailing his nephew to work for him day and night, fishing, farming, and doing the housework without a penny of wages, while he himself boozed his days away. Finally, Thomas had laced the old man's whisky with weed killer and told folk that his uncle had gone up to stay in London for some time. Thomas had gone out to work that day, planning to bury the body in the evening, but had been struck by lightning and unable to remember its temporary resting place when he came to on the spiritual plane. In emerging on the other side, young Spinach had found himself terrifyingly haunted, not by the spirit, but by the body of his uncle. He explained as Just as on the material plane, wrongdoers may be haunted by the spirit of their victim, so on the spiritual plane, they may, quite logically, be haunted by the body of their victim. Wherever he went, his uncle's bodily and palpable presence grimly pursued him, watching by his bed at night, swimming with him in the ethereal rivers, and he had learned that he could never find peace until it was given a proper burial. He begged the kind mediums to help him by finding the body of the awful man, having it buried and freeing him from its dreadful presence. As dusk fell and wind moaned around the outside of the house, Ludovic suggested that they look for the uncle, despite not a word of remorse in Spinach's message. The brother and sister searched the cellar, cupboards, woodshed and water tank for a nerve-wracking hour, even wondering if this was a tasteless practical joke from beyond. Then came a loud tapping from the front door. The man standing there said that he was the carrier from Rye bringing a note for Miss Byron. It was from Gramsby, who was declining to return to the cottage. She had heard things. She asked if they would pack her bag and send it. The carrier said that he would be going back to Rye in half an hour if they were sending the bag. Shaken, Ludovic and Sylvia lit the sitting-room fire and drew their chairs close in the eddying draughts. By now the full fury of a gale shook the house, but the pair remained determined to continue their search. Suddenly, something up the chimney caught Ludovic's eye, which he found to be a rope tied around a staple in the wall. They exchanged horrified looks as he told Sylvia to step back as he was going to undo it. There was a scrambling, shuffling noise from high up in the chimney, and in a cloud of soot, it fell with a heavy thud, sprawling across the hearth. The carrier had only just got to the garden gate as they fled out into the night, demanding to be taken into Rye to the police station, as an appalling act had taken place. The account of these amazing events duly appeared in the psychical papers and many others. Long queues of would-be sitters formed up for the Byron seances in the hopes of getting fresh revelations from young Spinach. But now at peace, and under the influence of the other guides, he gradually became quite commonplace, making the same charming and bland assurances.